Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back to the solo episodes that I'm doing about Canada and pushing back against the cultural Marxist agenda of erasing our history and us as a people and our heritage. This is 5 modern myths and lies about Canada, the history they don't want you to know about. We live in an era where guilt is a currency and history is a political weapon. The truth doesn't matter anymore. What matters is how much shame you can put on the people who built this country. We're going to be talking about the 5 biggest lies you've been fed about Canada. They say it's all stolen land, that Turtle Island was our real name, that the Chinese workers built the railway, and that Canada was built by immigrants, and that settlers wiped out indigenous people with smallpox blanket. Every one of these claims is either exaggerated beyond recognition or flat out false. Let's rip them apart. Canada is not stolen. The lie that the activists tell us is the slogan stolen land paints Canada as a single crime scene. Europeans supposedly stole a unified indigenous homeland. Before Europeans arrived, there was no such thing as a unified indigenous nation. Canada was a patchwork of over 600 different tribes, constantly at war, taking each other's territory through conquest, raids, and massacres. I'm sorry, I'm probably going to mispronounce some of these, just so you're aware. The Haudenosaunee Confederation alone expanded its territory by wiping out and displacing other tribes. If we're calling settlements theft, then indigenous groups were doing it for centuries before Europeans even showed up. The concept of land ownership did not exist in the Western legal sense. It was more about seasonal territory use, not permanent exclusive possessions. Vast portions of Canada were uninhabitable wilderness. No settlements, no permanent agriculture use when Europeans claimed them. Treaties were negotiated, often initiated by indigenous leaders themselves in exchange for goods, protection, and long-term peace. Many of these agreements were respected at the time. The stolen land narrative is an historical amnesia. If you go back far enough, every piece of land on earth was stolen from somebody else. Canada was settled, not stolen. And if we erase that, we erase the very foundations of this nation. Activists claim that Canada has always been known as Turtle Island by its true original inhabitants. But that's a lie. Turtle Island is a myth. The term Turtle Island comes from specific tribal creation stories from the Haudenosaunee and maybe one other tribe. It was never a universal term. Most of Canada's indigenous people had completely different creation myths. The Inuits, the Deans, the Crees, the Coast Salish, the Blackfoot, and dozens more never used that term at all. The concept of entire North America continent being Turtle Island is a modern activist invention from the 1970s to push a unified indigenous politics, not historical truth. Pretending it was this ancient universal name erases the fact that indigenous people were diverse, divided, and had unique, often conflicting worldviews. Turtle Island is a romanticized activist rebrand, not history. It's like claiming that all of Europe was once Viking land because a few Norse myths said so. Let's talk about the third myth on our list. The Chinese built the railways. Modern retailers suggest Canada's national railway was almost entirely the work of Chinese laborers. That's not true, though. The Canadian Pacific Railway was conceived, designed, and financed largely built by Europeans, Scottish, Irish, English, and French settlers. Chinese workers were hired in the late stages for specific dangerous sections through the BC mountains. They were a small percentage of the total labor. The engineering, surveying, and bulk of the track laying across the prairies, Ontario, Quebec, were all done by settlers. The vast majority of the distance had no The engineering, surveying, and bulk of the track laying across the prairies, Ontario, and Quebec were all done by settlers. The vast majorities of the distance had no Chinese crews at all. The myth ignores the fact that the CPR was a settler-driven national project, not something outsourced to foreign labor. Yes, Chinese laborers worked and suffered on parts of the railway, but saying they built it is like saying a painter built your house because he painted the trim. Canada was built by settlers, not immigrants. Canada's success is credited to endless waves of immigration, as if its diversity itself was the foundations. The first Europeans here weren't immigrants in the modern sense. They were settlers and nation builders. They didn't come and join an existing country, they came to create one from the ground up. Immigrants in the modern sense didn't start until Canada was already established with laws, governments, industries, and infrastructure, all built by settlers. The nation's legal, cultural, and political identity was formed by the British and French, not by later arrivals. Modern immigration is maintenance, not creation, and in many cases, replacement rather than contribution. Canada wasn't given to us by immigration. It was built by settlers, forged in wilderness, handed down to their descendants. Modern diversity benefits from that. It didn't create it. And we had our own diversity. When they say Canada was always a multiculturalist country, they meant the French, English, Irish, and Scottish, amongst other Europeans, who came together, blended together, and created a new people that we know now of as Canadians. Canada was 98% white until like the 70s. And even in the 90s, it was like 95% white. It wasn't until the last 20 years that they literally opened up the floodgates and allowed everyone from everywhere else to come in here and try to claim this for their own. When they don't, they do not assimilate. They do not contribute really anything to this country, in my opinion. They're just taking up space. And that's a fact. They're utilizing our social services. They're destroying the country from within by inverting it and importing their culture, which is very foreign and alien to what our culture is. And this should not be allowed. But we've had weak parasitic governments that are using these people as a weapon to destroy the national identity from within, because that's what communism is to erase the national identity of the people from within, to brainwash the youth to hate their history and their ancestors so they won't fight for the nation because they don't think it's worth fighting for. So this is one that gets spread around a lot. Smallpox were a common genocide tactic. Schools and activists teach that settlers and the military routinely use smallpox infected blankets to deliberately kill indigenous people. Which is a lie. The only documented case of such plan was during Pontiac's rebellion in 1763 in what is now the U.S., not Canada. Even that account is debated and may never have been actually been carried out. There is no solid historical evidence of this being done in Canada. Smallpox outbreaks happened long before settlers reached many areas, often spreading through indigenous trade work networks before direct contact with Europeans. Disease was devastating. Yes, but it was overwhelmingly unintentional transmission, not planned germ warfare. The smallpox genocide story survives because it's emotionally powerful, not because it's true. It's propaganda, not history. The truth about Canada's history is far from the guilt-driven fairy tales activists sell you. It wasn't stolen in a single act. It was settled through treaties, hard work and vision, and fought for and settled on. And the determination, blood, sweat, and tears of the white Europeans who built it, purchased it, and fought for it in galleon battles. Turtle Island was never a universal name. It was an invented political brand that was uttered by maybe one or two tribes of their myths about the creation of the land that they existed on. The railways were not built by the Chinese. The majority of it was built by the white Europeans. Only a small fraction of the railways were built by the Chinese, and they were hired, paid, and sent home. Canada wasn't built by immigrants. It was built by the people who founded it, that created it, the settlers who transformed this barren wilderness that 600 different warring native tribes were fighting over and stealing and colonizing each other by definition. And they developed this nation, and those are settlers. It was developed by settlers, not by immigrants. Immigrants show up to a country already developed. And smallpox blankets, well, that story belongs to an historical fiction. It's not real. It's not history. It's not based on any facts. It doesn't matter what they tell you. Our history is worth defending because without it, there is no Canada left to defend. They use these tactics to destroy the nation from within and constantly cause division. I will say one thing. I do believe that we should preserve Canadian culture and the Indigenous culture and blend it into one and become unified. As much as I push back against these narratives pushed by our government to sell a guilt based agenda, I do believe that in the end of all of this, the people that need to protect this nation and fight for it are the distinct European people who became Canadian, that blended together and became what a Canadian is, the French, English, Irish, and Scottish, amongst other Europeans who blended together. They lost their accents from the old world and they became something new, along with some of the indigenous tribes. We should be collectivizing together to build a unified nation, a homogenous society, a high trust society of what it used to be, and put our differences aside and come together as a unified collective people who want to preserve the culture of this nation.